My mum tried to stab me and I killed her, I think.
So did she just say her mum tried to stab her?
She grabbed me by the hair and dragged me from my room all the way to the kitchen, and she got a knife and she tried to stab me with it, and I grabbed the knife off her because I thought she was going to stab me, so I stabbed her back. And I was so heated up with anger, I just kept stabbing and stabbing and stabbing her, and I took off her head.
The call to 000 on 20th July 2019 came from inside a suburban home in St Clair, Western Sydney. On the line was 25-year-old Jessica Camilleri, speaking in a state of shock as she told operators that her mother was dead. Her words, recorded that night, would become the first piece of evidence in a case that shocked Australia. Within minutes, police and paramedics were dispatched to the address. What they found confirmed the seriousness of the call. A mother had lost her life, and her daughter was immediately taken into custody at the scene. How did a family dispute escalate to this outcome? And what does the case reveal about the complex intersection of violence, mental health, and responsibility? This is the story the media would later call the Mumkiller case. Rita Camilleri was 57 years old and lived in the Western Sydney suburb of St Clair. Those who knew her described a woman of kindness and steady routine, committed above all to her role as a mother. As a single parent, she carried the full responsibility of raising her daughter, maintaining a household, and navigating the challenges that came with both. Neighbours recalled her as polite, soft-spoken, and deeply attached to her family life. She represented the type of quiet resilience often found in suburban communities, where personal sacrifice was part of everyday existence. Her daughter, Jessica Camilleri, was 25 at the time. She lived with her mother in the family home on St Clair Avenue. Jessica was markedly different in temperament and outlook. From a young age, she faced difficulties that set her apart from peers, and by adulthood, her behaviour reflected a life shaped by health concerns and a preoccupation with particular interests. People close to the family noted her attachment to popular culture, especially films with fantastical or violent themes, and her tendency to become absorbed in them. These characteristics defined her daily routine and interactions within the household. The suburb of St Clair itself is an area of modest homes and quiet streets, located about 45 kilometres west of Sydney's central business district. It is a community built around families, schools, and local services, a place where evenings are usually calm. On 20th July 2019, the setting was typical of a Sydney winter. The air was cold, the neighbourhood still, and life outside the Camilleri home followed its ordinary rhythm. On the evening of 20th July 2019, the Camilleri household in St Clair settled into what seemed an ordinary winter night. Rita Camilleri, 57, was at home with her daughter Jessica, aged 25. The two shared the house as they had for many years, their lives closely tied in both routine and responsibility. As the night progressed, the quiet within the home gave way to rising tension. What began as a small disagreement soon grew more heated. Words were exchanged, and the atmosphere shifted from calm to unsettled. For neighbours outside, the street remained still and silent. But inside the walls of the Jessica's reactions became increasingly difficult to contain. Raised tones and sudden movements suggested agitation that was building rather than easing. Rita, who had managed many of her daughter's emotional outbursts before, once again tried to calm the situation. Yet the effort to restore peace appeared to falter. The clash between them lingered, drawing near. This was not a confrontation witnessed by strangers or officials. It unfolded in the privacy of a suburban lounge and kitchen, where family life had always taken place. A winter's night that began like countless others was turning in a different direction. The warmth and security expected within a home was slipping away, replaced by unease that neither mother nor daughter could easily resolve. At around 10:00 p.m. on 20th July 2019, the conflict inside the Camilleri residence escalated sharply. In the kitchen of the family home, Jessica Camilleri armed herself with a large kitchen knife. What began as raised voices only moments earlier became a violent assault. Jessica attacked her mother with the knife, striking repeatedly. The force and frequency of the blows left Rita unable to protect herself. In the confined space of the kitchen, she had no means of escape. The sounds of the struggle filled the house as the assault continued. Rita fell to the floor, gravely injured, and the violence did not subside until she was unresponsive. What followed went beyond the initial attack. Jessica continued her actions after her mother's death, using the knife to inflict further harm. She then carried part of her mother's remains outside the house. On the front lawn, in view of the quiet suburban street, she placed them on the grass. Inside the home, the kitchen bore the marks of what had occurred. Rita's body lay where she had collapsed, surrounded by the evidence of the assault. A space that had once been the centre of ordinary family life was transformed in minutes into a crime scene of shocking brutality. Outside, the winter night remained still, its calm in stark contrast to the events that had taken place within the Camilleri household. Neighbours and family members were the first to recognise the urgency inside the Camilleri home. Hearing raised voices and distress, a neighbour and Jessica's sister-in-law contacted 000, reporting what they believed to be a violent incident. Within the same period, Jessica herself placed a call to emergency services. Her words conveyed confusion and shock, acknowledging what had happened while asking whether her mother could somehow be brought back. These calls provided authorities with the first indication of the gravity of the situation and prompted an immediate police response to the quiet street in St Clair. Within minutes of the emergency calls, officers from the New South Wales Police Force arrived at St Clair Avenue. The quiet suburban street, normally undisturbed on a winter's night, was quickly transformed by the arrival of patrol cars and flashing lights. As officers approached the residence, the scene before them was immediately confronting. Standing on the front lawn was Jessica Camilleri. She was covered in blood and visibly unsettled. Her words to police were unusual and deeply troubling, asking whether she would face the death penalty and if her mother could somehow be brought back to life. The officers acted without hesitation, moving to secure her safely and placing her in handcuffs at the scene. Once Jessica was under control, attention turned to the property itself. Inside the kitchen, officers located the body of Rita Camilleri. The room bore clear evidence of a violent struggle with signs of extensive injury. Just outside, on the grass in front of the house, lay further confirmation of the severity of the incident. A blood-stained kitchen knife, believed to be the weapon used, was also recovered. The combination of what was observed inside and outside the home confirmed to attending officers that they were dealing with a crime of significant violence. The immediate actions taken by police ensured the safety of the scene and the preservation of evidence for specialist teams who would follow. The arrest of Jessica Camilleri was swift and decisive, marking the point at which the investigation formally began under the control of law enforcement. The process of examining the Camilleri home was undertaken with care and precision. Forensic officers entered once the scene had been secured, documenting every aspect of the property to preserve the integrity of the evidence. The kitchen, where the assault had taken place, became the primary focus. Photographs were taken from multiple angles, showing the extent of disruption within the room. Blood patterns on the walls, floor and surfaces provided clear indication of the violence that had occurred. The body of Rita Camilleri remained on the tiled floor until all necessary documentation had been completed. Attention then shifted to the front yard, where further evidence was located. The remains placed on the grass were examined in the context of their position and distance from the house. A large kitchen knife, stained with blood, was found and collected as the suspected murder weapon. Each item was tagged and stored under strict evidence procedures to ensure continuity for later analysis. The forensic pathologist conducted an examination of Rita's body, initially at the scene and later in the mortuary. The injuries were extensive, with well over 100 separate wounds recorded. The nature and distribution of the wounds confirmed the intensity of the assault. The post-mortem also documented the act of decapitation carried out after the fatal injuries had already been inflicted. These findings were consistent with a prolonged and frenzied attack. Establishing the time of death was an essential part of the examination. The pathologist noted that the injuries and physiological signs aligned with the time shortly after 10 p.m., which matched the information provided through emergency calls and police arrival. Toxicology tests were ordered as routine procedure, but there was no evidence to suggest the involvement of substances in the victim's system that would have influenced the outcome. Every detail gathered during the forensic process was critical in constructing a clear picture of what had taken place. The evidence supported the sequence already observed by police and provided the foundation for the legal proceedings that would follow. The careful documentation of injuries, the recovery of the weapon and the timing of death ensured that the case could move forward with a strong evidentiary base. The investigation into the death of Rita Camilleri was conducted methodically, with police and forensic specialists working to secure and examine every relevant piece of evidence. From the outset, the crime scene itself provided a substantial foundation. The kitchen knife collected at the property was immediately logged as the suspected weapon. Samples of blood found throughout the home and on external surfaces were carefully gathered, labelled and stored for later testing. These samples were compared against known profiles to confirm their origin. Fingerprints were also lifted from the knife and surrounding areas, consistent with standard forensic protocols. Alongside the physical evidence, investigators made use of technology to reconstruct the sequence of events. The call to 000 made by Jessica was retrieved in full and became a significant part of the case record. The audio captured her immediate state of mind and provided a timeline reference for when the incident occurred. Officers attending the scene were equipped with body-worn cameras, and the footage from these devices documented Jessica's behaviour upon police arrival, as well as the condition of the property at that time. This material was preserved as both evidentiary support and corroboration of written reports. Statements from witnesses were collected promptly. Jessica's sister-in-law, who had raised the alarm, provided details of the sounds she heard during the attack. Neighbours also reported hearing shouting and commotion from within the home shortly before police arrived. These accounts gave independent verification of the disturbance and were consistent with the timeline established through emergency calls and forensic findings. Investigators also examined Jessica's personal and medical history. Records indicated long-standing mental health difficulties and previous episodes of violent behaviour. Reports from clinicians, together with family accounts, helped establish a pattern that explained the volatility observed on the night of the offence. While these records did not determine criminal responsibility in themselves, they were crucial in framing the context for later legal proceedings. The process of collating all these strands of information required careful coordination. Each element, whether physical, digital, or testimonial, was assessed against the others for consistency. The evidence supported a clear picture. The assault had taken place inside the family kitchen shortly after 10:02 p.m., resulting in the death of Rita Camilleri. The actions that followed within the property and on the front lawn were confirmed by both forensic findings and eyewitness testimony. By drawing together forensic evidence, recorded material and witness statements, investigators were able to construct a comprehensive narrative of the events. The combination of immediate physical proof and supporting accounts left little ambiguity about what had transpired. With the investigative stage completed, the matter was prepared for the next phase. The focus turned to the formal questioning of Jessica Camilleri. In accordance with procedure, she was interviewed by detectives under caution. From the outset, she did not dispute her involvement. Instead, her account revealed a mixture of acknowledgement and confusion, as though she was struggling to comprehend the gravity of what had occurred. During the interviews, Jessica made a number of unusual remarks. She asked questions about possible punishments, including references to penalties not applicable under Australian law, and at other points she expressed a belief that her mother could somehow be revived. These statements reflected a state of agitation and uncertainty, recorded carefully by police as part of the evidentiary process. Her demeanour throughout was inconsistent. At times she appeared cooperative, answering questions directly, while at other moments she seemed distracted and unsettled. Detectives noted signs of anxiety and emotional instability that aligned with her known history of mental health difficulties. The interviews were fully documented through audio and video recordings, ensuring that both her words and her behaviour were preserved for later judicial consideration. With the suspect's interviews completed, investigators moved to consolidate the case file. The focus was on aligning the physical, testimonial and medical evidence into a coherent brief for the court. The kitchen knife, recovered at the scene together with extensive blood samples, was logged as central physical evidence. These items were matched against forensic findings to confirm their relevance. Witness statements from neighbours and the sister-in-law were formally recorded. Their accounts of hearing raised voices and distress, provided independent corroboration of the sequence already established through emergency calls and police arrival. Alongside this, the post-mortem report set out the extent of the injuries and confirmed the cause of death. Equally important were the medical records outlining Jessica Camilleri's history of mental health difficulties and intellectual limitations. These documents did not determine guilt, but offered essential context that would later be considered in court. By combining physical exhibits, forensic reports, witness testimony, and medical history, investigators produced a comprehensive and structured case file. This body of material ensured that the matter was ready to proceed beyond the investigative stage. The responsibility would now shift to the judicial system, where the evidence would be tested and assessed through formal proceedings. The trial of Jessica Camilleri was conducted in the Supreme Court of New South Wales. The proceedings brought together the extensive case file assembled by investigators, allowing the evidence to be examined and tested under judicial scrutiny. The Crown prosecution advanced the case on a charge of murder, emphasising the severity of the assault and the outcome it produced. The defence, however, centred its arguments on Jessica's mental health history. Reports from clinicians and records of previous treatment were presented to highlight the extent of her psychiatric and intellectual difficulties. The position of the defence was that her condition significantly impaired her capacity to control her actions and to fully understand their consequences. Over the course of the trial, the jury was presented with the competing arguments. They were required to weigh the physical evidence, the witness accounts, and the medical assessments in order to determine the appropriate finding. After deliberation, the jury accepted that Jessica's mental health had played a decisive role. The charge of murder was reduced to manslaughter on the basis of diminished responsibility. On 23 March 2021, the court handed down its sentence. Jessica Camilleri was sentenced to 21 years imprisonment, with a non-parole period of 16 years, 2 months and 30 days. The sentence reflected both the seriousness of the offence and the recognition of her mental health conditions. With the verdict delivered, the case moved from the fact-finding stage of trial to the long-term reality of imprisonment. The community response to the case was immediate and profound. News of a daughter killing her own mother in such violent circumstances generated shock across New South Wales and beyond. The brutality of the crime, combined with the fact that the victim was a parent, left many struggling to comprehend how such an event could occur within an ordinary suburban setting. Media outlets quickly labelled it The Mumkiller case, a name that reflected both the relationship between victim and offender and the disturbing nature of the offence. Public discussion extended beyond the crime itself. Attention soon turned to the issue of mental health and how individuals with significant psychiatric conditions are supported and monitored. Many questioned whether earlier intervention or closer management might have prevented the tragedy. Advocates for mental health reform used the case to highlight gaps in services and the risks posed when conditions remain untreated or inadequately addressed. The matter did not end with sentencing. Reports emerged from within the prison system of Jessica engaging in further violent behaviour. Accounts described incidents in which she attacked correctional staff, pulling hair and causing injuries. These events raised fresh concern about the safety of prison officers and the challenges faced by corrective services in managing high-risk inmates with complex mental health needs. The combination of the crime and the subsequent behaviour in custody fuelled a wider debate. Questions were raised about whether the justice system, in both its investigative and corrective phases, has the tools necessary to protect the community while also addressing the treatment needs of offenders with serious disorders. For many, the case became a reference point in discussions about the balance between punishment, public safety, and mental health care. The case of Jessica and Rita Camilleri stands as one of the most confronting examples of family violence in recent years. It was not only a tragedy within one household, but also a reflection of the broader challenges faced by the community. At its heart, it was a story of a mother and daughter bound by care and responsibility that ended in the most devastating of circumstances. The outcome exposed gaps in both the health and justice systems. Questions were raised about how effectively individuals with significant mental health conditions are supported, and whether the mechanisms in place are sufficient to protect families and the wider public. For many observers, the events underscored the need for closer coordination between medical services, social care, and law enforcement to prevent such tragedies. Beyond the immediate horror of the crime, the case became a catalyst for discussion about how society manages offenders with complex psychiatric needs. It highlighted the risks when intervention is delayed or insufficient, and the consequences when vulnerable individuals and those around them are left without adequate protection. This story is therefore more than a single act of violence. It is a reminder of the responsibilities carried by institutions and communities alike to safeguard lives and address the realities of mental illness with both compassion and vigilance. What do you think? Was the sentence fair in light of the circumstances, and should the legal system make changes in how it responds to offenders with severe mental health conditions? Your views matter, and the conversation continues.